Hello. Have you ever wondered why you behave the way you behave? Why do other people act the way they usually act? And sometimes it doesn't seem to make sense? Well, today I'm going to be speaking more about the ego, the body, the soul, and how these three things have a major impact in business, in relationships, and everything else in between. Welcome. Today I'm going to be speaking about the ego and how the ego works in combination with our soul and our body, and how these things combine to create what we call the human experience. This is really hard because in the beginning, when I started studying metaphysics and when I started studying coaching and self-improvement, I always had these lingering questions as to why do people have attitudes? Why do people have pride? Why do people commit crimes? Why do people behave in such a selfish behaviors? And what's the purpose of it? Why is it? Why does it exist? And this is what I'm going to be explaining right now. You see, in order for you to understand this, you must first understand, and I use a lot of resources for this, but one of the main inspirations that I received years ago was a short video by Hans Wilhelm. Hans Wilhelm, he did this wonderful video. And little did we know that that video was the beginning domino. It created a domino effect where everything that I continued studying for the following years ignited just from that one small video. Now, I'm going to use parts of it to explain an idea that he explains. First of all, you have to understand that we are human beings, and we're taught to believe that we are human beings that have souls, but it's actually the opposite. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. Chardin spoke about this, and it's very interesting because it starts to make a lot of sense as to why we do the things we do. Originally, when we come to planet Earth, we have this wonderful planet Earth, and we see this planet here. I just do a quick sketch here, planet Earth, right? Something really basic here, all right? And originally, when we come here to Earth, we are these mysterious energy forms, which many religions call them God. And basically, these energy forms, as explained by Hans Wilhelm, very well explained indeed, he shows us that we become interested. We develop this sense of curiosity when it comes to planet Earth. That curiosity makes us want to have a human experience. And that human experience begins with us wanting to come down here in material form. But what he presented, which was very shocking for me in the beginning, was that when we choose a body, I'm just going to draw a simple body here. Very, very, like a little stick figure here. And I have this body here. And that small body that we have there actually has a built-in mechanism. That built-in mechanism, which is actually the whole body itself, has an inner intelligence. And that inner intelligence wants us to survive. The body has what we call a survival mechanism. It's a survival system. And this survival system is, as he describes it, like some type of a computer This computer allows us to detect when there are going to be dangers. And we have the common behaviors. You can either fight, you can fly away, flight, or sometimes we also paralyze ourselves. So we go in this period of shock or paralysis. And our bodies are basically telling us how to survive. And this is independent of this concept of your soul. Your soul comes to inhabit into this body. Okay? So it comes here, it comes to inhabit in this body. And that's the soul. It comes to inhabit in this body. But here's the thing about it. The soul itself is not very aware of survival. The soul is eternal. The soul has no fear. There's nothing really to concern the soul here. And this is not good for the human experience, because otherwise then human bodies would not be surviving. So we would have very extremely short human experiences. In order to safeguard this human experience so that it can prolong it, we are born with this internal mechanism which allows us to survive. And that internal mechanism is what we call the ego. That is the self-preservation mechanism that is built into our bodies. And this self-preservation mechanism actually is the one that makes us have a long human experience. But what happens in the process is that we start feeding this ego, and from a young age we rely on this ego. I mean, the soul doesn't have a lot of experience on earth, so on the average they're going to have a harder time. So they rely heavily on the ego. The ego tells it when to eat, when to sleep, when to fight, when to run. And it starts getting more and more complex. It even shows us how to rely with groups, to rely in social structures for survival schemes. I mean, it's not all about survival. I mean, that's the whole thing. You know, the soul, it goes beyond survival. So some people actually explain that the soul itself just wants to have this wonderful experience called the human experience. But then we are born into this body which has a built-in protection mechanism, which is the ego. And it's all about survival. It's all about succeeding in this life, because it treats this life as the only thing it has. But it gets even more complex because the ego starts developing a personality. I mean, if you think about it carefully, I mean, the ego has been sleeping with you, has been coexisting with you since you were born. So it has its unique personality, and that unique personality is going to create this effect where you're going to have like two voices. One is your soul telling you something, and then the other one's going to be your ego telling you something else. So you might say, oh wow, I really want to have this, let's go to the beach, it's going to be amazing. And then we have the ego saying, you know, your cousin almost drowned last summer. Don't go to the beach. The currents are very dangerous. You can get sunburned. There's a crime wave going on the beach. So you shouldn't go there. And the soul is just simply, it would be really nice to go to that beach. See how the ego and the soul interact with each other? And we do the same thing for even some of the weirdest things. I mean, the way we dress. So for some strange reason, as social creatures, we believe in having these social structures, and we want, some people call them the alpha creatures, the alpha members of the tribe. Some people differ with that though, but and basically what we're trying to explain here is that you trying to succeed in life, you trying to receive and grow bigger and grow bigger and grow bigger, can happen for two reasons. One reason is grow bigger, the soul saying grow bigger, because you want to have more creative power and to experience more of this human experience. Okay? But yet the ego on the other side is saying grow bigger so you can be safer, so that you can be above everyone else, so you can be more powerful, so that no one can defeat you. See the difference? And our egos are making us dress in certain ways because we want to belong to the alpha group. They're making us protect ourselves even to a point that it's excessive. I mean, we can be very compulsive and obsessive with things like weapons, like fighting, like it's simply because we start taking a liking to this concept of being above everyone else. We even want to go up the social ladder or up the business ladder with this attitude. So we start becoming then egocentric. That means that the ego becomes the center of everything that we do. But remember, everything is based on a survival scheme. Everything. We were discussing this in a course a few semesters back, and we're speaking to young ladies, for example. One possibility here is, young ladies, they dress a certain way and to get more attention. The advantage of getting this attention, it might actually allow them to belong to an alpha group, and that alpha group is going to have greater benefits. You see? And their lives are going to be easier by going in that direction. That's one possibility. Another possibility is a guy that, he wants to have a partner. And he says, oh, but they don't like skinny guys, and I want to be all buffed up and, have a six-pack and be totally, like huge. And he actually starts spending a lot of time on becoming this huge thing, which, he takes it to an extreme that even some girls might even think about it twice before even starting a relationship with him. So this is the way that this whole thing works. Even when we're dressing, when we're wearing fashion, even when we get a car, anything that brings a sense of status, that allows us to be in the alpha group. So it all boils down to survival. And so people that lose control of this ego and make all their decisions based on strictly survival, and they become obsessed with this survival schemes, pleasure schemes, and believe it or not, also reproductive schemes, because these bodies are built to reproduce. So there is an innate biological intelligence, part of the ego, that's saying, go out there and reproduce. That's very important, especially when you're in those ripe years, when suddenly, you're a young person and your hormones kick in, and it's screaming at you and telling you, you have to go out there and you need to find a partner fast. And you have this sense of desperation because your body is telling you this. So all of this actually stems from the ego. And initially, if you notice, when I drew the ego very large, I put two little horns on it. And it's a symbolic concept because, here's the big question. Is Such concepts such as the devil or Satan or any evil entity that we create, are those creatures actually real, or are they a product of our ego? I'm not saying I have the answer here. All I'm saying here is that that is a question for us to reflect on. Many of the things that we realize that evil creatures do supposedly and are actually all nothing but exaggerated, out of control characteristics of our ego. So that's the whole thing. Now let us do everything in contrast. When we talk about the ego, now let us talk about the soul. The soul simply wants to have a human experience here on earth, on this universe. That's all it wants. The soul has no fear because the soul can't die. The soul can't be destroyed. The soul is eternal. So there's nothing that could truly harm the soul. I mean, there are other religions which have other belief systems that mention things that can destroy a soul, but there are others that do not, you see. And so you have these two extremes here. And you might call this the little angel and the little demon, or the little devil. As you can see it in Tom and Jerry cartoons, you can hear them, the little devil and the little angel telling him, do the good, and the other one saying, no, I'll do the bad. Hell with it. So this is the way that we make our decisions when they are ego-based. We are simply complicating our survival schemes. Another simple example of this. It can be very direct, or it can be very subtle. It can be something as direct as, you try to hurt me, I hurt you worse. I'll beat you up. You see how it works? You see? That's the ego. And it can also be something very subtle. I want to have a good life. I want to survive. I want to reproduce. And I want to do it in a safe environment. So I am going to study a safe career that is going to bring me a good income so that I can be among the alpha group, so that I can have a good mate, so that I can have good children and be able to educate them so that they can do the same and survive in this social structure, and so that my children can marry someday and continue this process. They continue reproducing and creating a social structure that promotes this wonderful survival, this whole convenient thing. It could be as subtle as that. You see? So every time you speak to someone, when a person is really hurt, let's take an example of a criminal. You know, from what I've researched, I mean, criminal minds, it's very rare that you find a criminal mind that is a criminal mind uniquely, you see. On average, most people at a young age, they start receiving a very bad childhood. And this childhood is putting them in this position where survival is above everything else, and they need to be on top of everybody else. And that is the only thing that gives them a sense of pleasure, because everything that surrounds them is pain. You see? And so these criminals reach a point where they're so their ego, that we say that they are so addicted to the ego that they rely on violence and crude ways of getting things done for their survival, for their pleasure, for their reproduction. It's just very complicated. And so you'll realize that people that tend to have criminal tendencies, these people have very strong ego centricity. Everything revolves around them. They are number one, number two, number three. They are everything. And everybody else around them has to submit to them. And the only way they will negotiate anything is that they could get something greater in return. You see? So now we're talking kind of like the mentality of a sociopath, or with a person that is a psychopath, and you see this pattern where everything revolves around them. And they can be extremely smart, by the way, very smart, because the ego can be very brilliant. The ego relies more on memory. The ego relies more on logic, you see. And it's very interesting. The soul is different. The soul can use memory and logic, but the soul relies a lot on intuition. And it for no logical reason, it makes certain decisions and things work out for the best. This is what we call intuition. You see? It's a higher knowing, a knowing that goes beyond the average logic. So, whenever you're dealing with people, as I usually share with some of my students, some people use the little L of losers. Well, whenever I see a person with a lot of egocentricity, and you can see this on some artists, because their egos lose control, because they get all this affirmation that they are so amazing, and even if they do it wrong, people still love them for it. So that ego gets inflamed and swelled up to such a point that these gigantic ego. It's like the E right there, you see. And so they have these huge egos, and they make these decisions which don't make logical sense. Okay? So just look around you and look at this possibility. If you can now speak to people and not take it personally, this has helped me in understanding the true meaning of forgiveness. Because I realize that even though a person his ego can do incredible harm to me, and it probably already did, but deep inside I know that there is a soul that's trapped in that ego. It's almost like a rodeo run where you have the person that is on top of this bull, and this bull is hitting hard, and you have this person just holding on to it. So sometimes I see the bull as the ego, and the actual driver on top of the bull as a soul. And sometimes you have souls that are pretty much taken. They're actually taken prisoner by their egos. So be very careful with your ego. Pay attention to it and realize that you have an ego that you need to keep an eye on, and that everyone around you has an ego too. All right? So I hope that this information has given you some ideas. Please, if you like the information that I'm sharing with you, please put on the comments below. And if you can, just hit the subscribe button so that I can continue creating more videos on life coaching, self-improvement, and try to make some sense out of this human experience.